Naman po ang kinalaman ng nabanggit niyong virtue ethics dito sa integrity initiative na ito. Ano-anong kabutihang asal ang nakapagsusulong ng integrity initiative?
Okay, thank you very much again, Prof. Ray. Malaki po ang kinalaman ng virtue ethics sa integrity initiative. Bago ko po ipagpatuloy siguro yung kasagutan ko, nabanggit ko po kanina na naisama po ako dun sa pulong. I think that was October 25, Tuesday last week. And once again, I'd like to greet yung kasamahan po natin sa Integrity Initiative. At nagpupugay po ako sa inyo sapagkat nagkaroon po ng ganitong napakahalagang inisyatiba. Sumulat din po ako ng isang pahina lang po na kasulatan tungkol sa sarili ko pong thoughts on the issue of integrity. And doon po sa sinulat ko yun, binanggit ko po itong virtue ethics at ang kahalagahan nga na magkaroon ng bawat manager at bawat organizational member ng ilan dito sa mga pinag-uusapan nating important virtues, especially for workers. And I realized na talagang magkaugnay po yung integrity at saka yung virtue ethics na itinuturo ko po sa UP. Tulad ng nabanggit ko kanina, kapag virtuous or may kabutihang may mabubuting asal, ang mga managers at lahat ng bumubuo ng isang kumpanya, what in general we call organizational members. For example, kapag sila ay honest, hindi nagsisinungaling, or mapagkumbaba, hindi sila ay responsable sa assets at property ng kumpanya, they are generous and magnanimous. Magnanimous is a very important word, very important virtue, and yet I think it's rarely talked about. Kung iisipin natin po yung salita, I think it's the coming together of two important root words. Manus, mania, manium, Latin for great or big. Tapos anima, anime, it's soul. So in effect, kadakilaan ng kaluluwa. Actually, the bigness of heart is not sufficient to define magnanimity. It's actually the bigness of soul kung susuriin natin ang pinaka-root niya. So I think there is a huge need for our corporate executives and managers to be magnanimous, to have a big heart. Not just a big heart, pero a big soul, isang malaking kaluluwa. If we can talk about because of course, we know that ang kaluluwa po ay isang espiritual na bagay. So, hindi po natin pwedeng i-measure siya in physical terms. Pero, if we can speak somehow, analogically, we can say that magnanimity speaks of a bigness of soul, if we can speak in those terms, no? So yun ang importante po, no? So pag may mga gantong kabutihang asal ang ating mga managers, especially for example mga auditing firms, no? Then ang ano po mga epekto, ang mga financial reports ay magiging makatotohanan, makatarungan sa lahat ng partido ang mga transaksyon. Hindi papaboran yung mga paborito o mga kamag-anak, okay? Mababawasan ng husto ang korupsyon or katiwalian at marami pang ibang benepisyo. So, sa makatuwid, ito po I think, ang kaugnayan, ang ugnay ng integrative initiative at saka yung tinuturo ko pong virtue ethics. I tried my best in that one-page thoughts or article which I sent to the integrity initiative people, precisely my thoughts on the connection. I hope that at some point we can really truly understand it. So that's how I'll answer your question. Thank you very much, Prof.
Itong virtue kasi,
yes,
Doc, means manliness, ano?
Yes, right, that's correct. Yes. Which is part of courage also, yes, that's correct. But we can talk about it, yes.
But sinasabi natin na by our own power, we
yes,
cannot do anything, you know.
That's correct.
Jesus Christ said, without me, you can do nothing.
That's correct.
So how do you connect virtue or maintenance, acquisition, and perseverance in virtue in relation to grace?
Okay. Maraming salamat po sa inyong katanungan, Prof. Ray. I'll try to answer it in the following way. Kung babalikan po natin yung fortitude as a cardinal virtue, in effect, when we consider it as a cardinal virtue, I think nakapaloob po doon yung larangan, yung nivel, yung antas ng pagkatao lamang, human level. Pero at the same time po, I think it also encourages us to practice fortitude or courage also at the supernatural level. So, in other words, pag nagtuturo po tayo ng kabutihang asal, we can deal with specific virtues because iba't-iba po kasi ang uri ng virtues. There are what we call the human virtues. And then the cardinal virtues are actually moral virtues which in effect deal with the human actions, but at the same time they also are inclusive of our actions also at the supernatural plane. And then of course there are these virtues which we call theological virtues, which are really at the supernatural plane. So in other words, when we get to fortitude, it encourages us to practice it, the courage or fortitude, katatagan ng loob, in all levels. So I think it covers both the courage at the human level, but at the same time, it also encourages us to practice courage also at the supernatural level. And that's the reason. So see, that's one way in which I will try to I will answer your question. The other way is definitely magkakaugnay lahat ng makabutihang asal. Meaning, you will never find a virtue that is separate and divorced from other virtues. In other words, may kahalagahan na sikapin nating lahat na i-practice ang lahat ng virtues. Of course, it's very difficult. That's why it's a task of a lifetime, no? But we cannot deny the fact that lahat ng mga virtues na to, map of human virtues tsaka theological virtues or supernatural virtues, lahat sila magkakaugnay. It's difficult to, for example, carry on life on this earth without, for example, the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. In fact, those theological virtues somehow inform, no? Give form to the other virtues, including the human virtues. For example, when I teach fidelity, I would always make a distinction between loyalty, which is at the human level, and when it's loyalty to God, then it's called fidelity. Pero magkaugnay po yung human, ibig sabihin, ang kaugnayan nila is the supernatural virtues help the human person to actually supernaturalize himself or herself. So that's the two ways in which I'll answer it. That when you think about specific virtues, may mga nilalaman siyang human level at the same time supernatural level, and that magkakaugnay po lahat ng kabutihang asal. That's why, in other words, Christian life is all about really the practice of the virtues over time. So that sa kaduluhan ng ating buhay, sana we would have achieved a greater number of virtues.